Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be talking about probably the most requested video on my channel, and that is how to find your optimal sensitivity in Fortnite. This is mainly going to be for PC players, but if you're on console you can still benefit from a lot of this, including the ADS course which I'm going to show you guys, and then some of the other tips if you ever plan on switching or just using keyboard and mouse on console. But before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know about a cool little promotion that Fortnite is running. So if you guys enter a support a creator code from today until the 22nd of February, you get a free Cuddle Hearts wrap, and Epic is upping the percentage that creators get paid out to 20% from 5%. So if you guys want to support me, this is definitely the time to do it, and this will allow me to have bigger giveaways and other stuff. So make sure to use my code JERIAN in the item shop. So now let's get back to Fortnite sensitivities. It's without saying that finding your perfect sensitivity is not really that easy, because if it was, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. I'm going to cover the three main aspects of your sensitivity, and that is your DPI, your eDPI, and then your in-game X and Y sensitivity, and then your ADS and scope sensitivities. As a little preface, please do not go and copy my sensitivity or the sensitivity of pro players you watch, as there's a 0.001% chance that that will work for you. Also, just realize that there's no perfect sense. Some people like low sense like Tifu, who plays on 400 DPI and I think 0.08 in-game sense. And then there's people who like high sense like Mr. Savage M or Liquid Vivid, who plays on 800 DPI and 0.17 sense. As long as you're comfortable with your sense, you'll be able to improve your shot and become a better player overall. So let's first start with finding your DPI. Your mouse's DPI, which stands for dots per inch, is just a measurement of how sensitive your mouse is. The higher your DPI, the more your cursor will move across the screen when you move your mouse. An example of a low DPI is 400, which is what I use, and a more middle ground DPI is 800, and then a high DPI is 1600 and above. Your DPI for Fortnite is probably the least important aspect of your sensitivity, because it's really only used for swapping around weapons and consumables in your inventory, and as I'll discuss in a second, what's even more important is your eDPI. Your DPI is more important for doing things on your computer outside of Fortnite than it is in Fortnite, so my advice for finding your optimal DPI is to find what's comfortable while messing around with stuff on your desktop. If 800 DPI is way too fast, like it was for me, then just bump it down. And with most mice nowadays, you can actually customize your DPI. 400, 800, and 1600 are popular numbers, but you can always try things like 600, 1000, or 1200 DPI. The reason that you see most people use the same DPI is because old mice used to have what was called a native DPI, where if you didn't use the native DPI, your cursor would skip around and be inaccurate. So people would use their mouse's native DPI, and as time progressed, everyone just stuck with the same DPI, and new players would just copy that. To set a custom DPI for your mouse, I have a Logitech G703, so to change my DPI, I just go into my Logitech software and I can put in any specific number that I want. I'm sure whichever mouse you have, there will be software that comes with it, whether it's like Razer or whatever brand it is, that will allow you to customize your DPI value, unless you're using like a $5 Amazon Basics mouse, which in that case, I'm sorry for you. My final note on DPIs is that there's no best DPI. The higher you go, obviously the more uncontrollable it will be. Use what you like and what you're most comfortable with, given your mouse pad, your mouse, and whether you like using your arm or you're more of a wrist gamer. If you find a value that you're comfortable with, go and mess around with your inventory in creative and see if you can quickly swap items and drop them out of your inventory. After that, we now have the first aspect of our sensitivity done, and we can move on to our in-game X and Y sensitivities. If you guys remember what I just talked about a minute or two ago, I said that your eDPI is more important than your DPI, and that's because your eDPI is your in-game sensitivity times your DPI. So your eDPI is basically your effective sensitivity in Fortnite, and it basically tells us, regardless of what your DPI is, what your sensitivity is. And what I mean by that is that while I play on 400 DPI, my brother plays on 800 DPI, but that doesn't mean he plays on a higher sense, because we haven't factored in our in-game sensitivities. So if he were to play on 0.05 in-game sense and I played on 0.11 sense, then he would actually play on a lower sense than I do, even though his DPI is double mine. And that's just because his eDPI comes out to 40 and my eDPI would come out to 44. Just like your in-game Fortnite sensitivity and your mouse DPI, the higher your eDPI number, the higher your overall sensitivity is. Another example is that someone who plays on 2000 DPI and 0.02 in-game sense has the same effective sensitivity or eDPI as someone who plays on 400 DPI and 0.1 in-game sense. A relative scale for eDPI would be anything lower than 50, so that would be considered low sense, and you'll find most of these people like me who use these low senses with pretty big mouse pads and using most of their arms for aiming and playing Fortnite. A medium sensitivity would be anything from 50 eDPI to around 90. This is where most people will probably fall under, as they use a little of their arm and wrist for playing but don't need a huge mouse pad. High sense is mainly anything above 90 eDPI, and these are mainly wrist gamers because of how little they have to move their mouse compared to low sense players who use a lot of their arm. These are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're finding your in-game X and Y sensitivity, also known as your hipfire sense, because this is a sensitivity that you'll be using to hipfire, which means not aiming down sights with shotguns and SMGs. And maybe more importantly, it is your sensitivity for building and editing. So first we'll discuss how to get a comfortable hipfire sense. My suggestion is to first use the shotgun course, which I will have a code for in the description and up on the screen now. It's all close quarter shotgun aim and includes editing and building, so it should help you to find what you're comfortable with. I uploaded a walkthrough of the course on my channel if you haven't seen that already, but remember that your in-game sense can be anything, so just keep eDPIs in mind when choosing it and what's best for you. After you get a decent idea for what you like, just go into creative and start messing around with builds. Make sure you can at least do a 180 from swiping one side of your mousepad to another. Some people like the idea that you should be able to do a 360 from one side of your mousepad to another, but I don't follow that. I can't do a full 360, I can almost do one. So if you can at least do a 180, you should be fine. I will tell you though that if you're doing like 10 or 15 360s from one side of your mousepad to another, then you're probably on too high of a sense, and I guarantee if you lowered it a little, your accuracy would improve a lot. After that, start doing just random builds like ram pushes and 90s and see if you need to adjust your sense to make it higher. If you're going to adjust it, you should adjust it in increments of 0.01. So right now Fortnite has sensitivities with 3 decimals. So an example would be changing it from 0.110 to 0.120 or to 0.100. Some people like Mongrel like to have their Y sensitivities, which is looking up or down, as lower than their X sensitivities, and they usually lower it by 0.01 or 0.02. So I think Mongrel had his as like 0.11, and then his Y sensitivity is 0.09 or 0.10. So just test this out yourself and see if you guys can hit shots better and if your building feels more in control. But most people tend to have their X and Y sensitivities the same, like myself. If you really want to fine tune your hipfire sense, then jump into KovaaK and practice on a game like Tile Frenzy 180. I use the custom shotgun crosshair from Fortnite to make the practice more realistic. And if you guys don't know how to get your sense from Fortnite into KovaaK or the custom crosshair, just make sure you check out the video that I uploaded on KovaaK, as that will pretty much tell you everything you need to know. I've said this a few times in my videos, but the best practice for your hipfire sense is to move from target to target quickly, as you will improve your aim much faster by missing a couple of times and just slowly going to each target and never missing. The last thing you should do, which kind of goes without saying, is just go into a normal game and fight against actual people, whether that be in a solo, duo, squad, or even team rumble, and just practice your hipfire aim with SMGs and shotguns and other stuff on actual players. This will give you an idea if you need to adjust it, if you find that you can't cover yourself quick enough, if you're getting shot from behind because maybe your sense is too low, or maybe you're losing control of your edits and builds because your sense is just way too fast. Now we can move on to ADS and scope sensitivities. If you didn't know what ADS is, ADS stands for aim down sights, and that's a sensitivity for when you're aimed in with a gun like an assault rifle, SMG, or shotgun. So that's just when you hit right click on PC, or if you hit the left bumper on Xbox or PS4. Luckily for finding your ADS and scope sensitivities, we were blessed by the almighty god Beaks, who made an amazing tracking course with robot targets. As you can see, the course features a bunch of golf carts with the sentry robots on them. Some of the targets get bounced up or are sent off the track and fly down, so you get a bit of tracking practice with targets going straight across as well as up and down. Sometimes the targets are glitched, so if you just see them standing still on the track without moving at all for like 30 seconds or so, just go and kill them. But the llamas behind you will spawn with pretty much everything you need, from an assault rifle to deagle to scope weapons like snipers. If you don't have an ADS sense that you're comfortable with right now, I suggest starting at one of two values. Either start at 0.500 or 1.00. So 0.5 means that your ADS sense will be half of your hipfire sense, while 1.0 means that your ADS sense and your hipfire sense will be the exact same. There are pros and cons to both. I use 0.400, so I prefer having my ADS much slower than my hipfire sense, as I think it's easier to hit faraway targets for me. Many pros and people use 1.0 as they like their ADS sense to be consistent with their hipfire sense, so if they're in a fight and they aim down sight, it won't slow them down at all. Personally, I like the opposite, but you should just try both and see what you prefer and then make adjustments after. So if you like 0.500 for example, and you want to be much more accurate, you can try tracking on the targets and then make adjustments in measurements of 0.01. So that would be going from 0.50 to 0.49, or like going from myself 0.40 to 0.41 or 0.39 if it felt too fast. You can do this for both your ADS and scope sensitivities, so make sure to use one assault rifle and then one scope weapon to find your perfect sensitivities for both. It's pretty hard to hit sniper shots in this course, so I use a scope pistol. And again, before you hop into an actual game, you can go and practice even more in KovaaKs. For your ADS sense, you'll want to follow my guide in the video I plugged before, as I show exactly how to get your ADS and hipfire sense from Fortnite. The games I recommend for practicing your ADS aim are Ascended Tracking 90 Small and Ascended Tracking V3, which now allows you to practice your hipfire and ADS aim if you hold down right trigger. Try to improve your accuracy and staying on the targets for as long as you can and readjusting quickly if they juke you out. The last thing you should do, which I mentioned a little before, is just go into a game of Team Rumble and practice picking off people from across the map or gliding in from the sky. Team Rumble is actually surprisingly good for practicing your ADS aim, so if you haven't played it before, I definitely recommend practicing your ADS aim in it. Overall, if you guys follow what I laid out in the video, you should be able to get a pretty good feel for what your DPI, hipfire, ADS, and scope sensitivities are. Just remember two things. First is that there's no perfect sensitivity, and there will be tons of comments with people posting their own sensitivities to prove that. And the second thing is that if you feel your sensitivity is too fast, make sure to lower it, whether that be your in-game X and Y sensitivity or your ADS sensitivity. And then if you feel that you're too slow, try upping your sensitivity, and that can be, your in-game or your ADS sense. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. This video shout out goes to Spoops, who used my code JERIAN in the item shop. So that's all for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.